All right, we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Atlassian Rovo webinar. My name is Joshua Demetri. I'm a software development manager at Valiantys, and I spend a lot of time talking with our customers and kind of working on, how we can build custom solutions or, do tools implementations around products like Rovo and implementing AI across the organization and what that looks like for, an enterprise or a smaller business, or how we can integrate that into really any process that you have currently today in your organization. So I want to start by just kind of doing a bit of an introduction of Valiantys and some of the values that we bring and what we do, and then we'll go from there into some content as we're starting to stream into our webinar here. So let me go ahead and just give you a little bit of background on what we do at Valiantys. So we are a platinum solutions partner with Atlassian, and we basically have a whole wide array of services. So that goes from consulting to licensing to integration and development, which is where I come from, managed services and training as well, which is like the webinar that you're attending currently. So really a wide array of things going all the way from tools implementation to the integration and development, where we are building, custom tooling or doing custom implementations of tools like the Atlassian Cloud suite of products, including Rovo and Atlassian Intelligence and all the different areas of the cloud platform. So very brief intro to Valiantys, got that out of the way. Let's go ahead and move on to talking about Rovo, which is what we're all here to have some information around and go a little bit deeper into. So let me go ahead and move on to that. And I want to actually start from just this idea of a connected enterprise and what does that mean and kind of where does our current cloud architecture look like in the Atlassian cloud products. The reason why I'm starting here with something that doesn't even have Rovo on the screen is because I think it's actually pretty important to understand the context for which we are going to be adding Rovo into. So Rovo is going to be a tool that's going to enhance this process and kind of build on top of what I'm talking about on this slide here. I just want to be able to give some background on what should our cloud architecture with the Atlassian suite of products even look like before we introduce Rovo. This is a diagram that I use in a lot of different scenarios to kind of outline that process. Let me kind of walk through some of the pieces of it and why it's important. So on the left here in this blue box, everything here is Atlassian products. So this is your Jira Confluence, Analytics, Atlassian Intelligence, Jira Align. All the Atlassian products are in this blue box that we are going to be then wanting to connect to some external processes maybe, or we want to kind of build our architecture out of. And on the right, you'll see that we've got some customer tooling and applications and some external data sources. Essentially, what we're outlining is that you have more than just Atlassian products in your organization, almost certainly. You've got other SaaS products, you've got internally developed tools and processes, you've got integrations with external processes into your Atlassian products potentially. There's a lot that happens in an organization with both Atlassian products and outside of it. And so what we want to do is use the Atlassian Cloud Platform as a way to enhance the entire organization's practices and processes, rather than just have it isolated into its corner that it might be in this kind of work management bubble, right? So looking at the cloud architecture here, what we're going to see is that we have connected our Atlassian products to all of these external sources, custom applications, custom dashboards. Maybe you have a Tableau, dashboard set up that you're going to be running data into, integrations or other SaaS products like I was mentioning before. And I want to talk about what is in the middle here called Forge. I'm not going to get as deep into Forge as I might in a Forge specific webinar or kind of in some deeper conversations around it. But I think it's important to talk about here because when we talk about Rovo, we are inevitably going to move into the conversation of custom tooling. And Forge is a big part of that for the Atlassian Cloud platform. So when we look at Atlassian Cloud, Forge is the developer platform that Atlassian provides for extending the feature set of their products in cloud. So when we're looking at using Jira and Confluence and Jira Align and kind of all these different products and wanting to take that and integrate it into our process and build, this connected enterprise where we can extend the features that we have in those products to do the exact type of functionality that we need for our organization. Forge allows us to do that. The reason why Forge exists is because Atlassian knows that they can build the platform and the foundation and kind of build the structure for everything to be built on top of. But every organization does things a little bit differently, has different needs and different requirements. And Forge allows us to build into our Atlassian Cloud platform all of the things that we need in order to support the specific processes and kind of independent needs of our business, aside from just what the base platform provides. So that's kind of an intro to Forge. Obviously, we're kind of just scratching the surface there, as we are with most things on this slide. I just wanted to give a little bit of background of where are we putting Rovo into when we're looking at this equation. So this is kind of our starting point. This is the cloud architecture for a connected enterprise using Atlassian Cloud Platform. And this is basically bringing all of our data in the organization, both inside the Atlassian products and outside of it, into kind of these external tools, bringing that into the conversation with our Atlassian Cloud Platform. Now, going to the next slide, this is where does Rovo fit in? Because that's the natural question, right? You're here for a Rovo webinar. Where does Rovo fit into that cloud architecture? And how does that look across the enterprise or across the organization of any size, really? If I look at this diagram, you'll notice that on the left, in that blue box on the left, most of the things that are there have already been in place. It's all the same products from Atlassian. This is your Atlassian Cloud suite of products. And on the right, we still have our customer tooling and we still have external applications. So you're still going to have your processes that go beyond the Atlassian tools. You're still going to have your core Atlassian products. And now in the middle, I've kind of expanded a little bit on both Forge and now Rovo has been added to the equation. So what I'm really wanting to call out here is that where Forge has already been a way to kind of connect our enterprise together, right? It's been a way to connect external data, external sources, external processes into our Atlassian Cloud Platform. Rovo is also going to serve that purpose in a lot of ways for our cloud structure here, right? So we're going to have our cloud tools, we're going to have our maybe on-prem customer tooling or other cloud products, and Rovo is going to now be part of the equation to connect all of that together. And Rovo is also connected directly with Forge, which allows us to use both of those together to continue that process of building our cloud architecture into this kind of overall solution that really handles all of the different processes. So what you'll notice in this Rovo box is that we've got three main categories of Rovo that we want to be talking about. So we have search, we have chat, and we have agents. And I've got some slides on each of those, and I'm going to kind of dig into each one of those individually. But I wanted to introduce them here because it's important to understand that Rovo as a product is going to contain kind of these three buckets of features. The search is one major feature set, with chat and agents being the other two. So where do they fit into this architecture within that Rovo box? The Rovo Search feature set is going to be how we find data across the organization. So if you ever hear somebody talking about enterprise search or kind of looking for a way to search in one centralized location across all of the data, both in the Atlassian products and in external products, because search will actually allow us to connect to other tools as well, which I'll show here in a second. That's where search fits in. It's how we find information quickly and effectively and kind of get that context from one single location. Now, Rovo Chat is essentially where we kind of have the alarm bells go off in our head of, oh, this is just ChatGPT, but in Atlassian products, it kind of looks like that from the initial standpoint. I'm going to spend some time on our Rovo Chat conversation, talking about why it's a little bit different than just ChatGPT and what it really adds to the equation and how it having context of the data in your Atlassian instance makes it a lot more valuable than just a generic AI chatbot and kind of where that fits in. But chat is going to be fitting the role of finding insights and creating information based off of the context that we can get from Rovo and from our Atlassian products. Now, agents is the last one, and agents will be the one that we spend probably the most time on in our kind of demo section where I'm showing you some of these things actually running, because agents provides a lot of possibilities. This is where we can have basically AI acting almost as a teammate and kind of interacting with the tools on our behalf. This is where agents can do some automated processes. They can, handle some more complex tasks than just the chat might be able to do on its own without the context of the agents. So agents are going to be where we really take this to the next level, and also where we integrate with Forge and go to kind of endless possibilities of how we can integrate Rovo into our process. You'll notice that in Forge, we kind of have a couple different separated ideas here, and I'll get into those later when we talk about that part of the integration. But I just want to kind of introduce you to, in the cloud architecture, where does Rovo fit into the equation? And that's kind of where those three areas are going to fit. Now, from here, what I want to do is kind of break each of those three sections down a little bit further. So let's start with search and kind of talk a little bit more about the details around it. So like I mentioned before, the intention behind search is to provide a single place to find information across the entire enterprise. This is where we want to be able to, from a single search box, find data from my Atlassian tools, so Confluence and Jira, especially JSM projects, but we also want to be able to find information from tools outside of Atlassian. So we're going to be able to also have external connections here to things like Google Drive or Slack or any other tools that you might want to integrate. There is kind of a set of built-in connectors that we can use, and those are expanding as time goes on as Atlassian builds more connectors for that search. So what this allows us to do is from one single location, we can search for, let's say, give me information on a particular project. And if there's maybe some documents in Google Drive about that project, along with the tasks to actually, take action on that project that live in my, Jira project for that same project, it'll find the information from both of those sources and be able to provide that to me in a list where I can filter and kind of gather some information together and be able to find everything in a single place, but from all of the different sources in my organization. So it's kind of that unified search that we were looking for in that previous kind of talking point there. So search is going to be kind of the easiest to implement feature of Rovo because essentially you just turn it on and it works. If you want to connect external sources, you just add a connection, and then all of a sudden, after it spends some time indexing those results, it'll be able to give you all the data that you're searching for across all of those tools. So really, this is one that you can just turn the feature on. You can, add your connections, and it's already working and adding value. Let's go next into chat, which is sort of similar to that, where you can basically just use this out of the box and it's going to do some really cool things for you. And chat is that one that I was saying that feels a little bit like ChatGPT, right? Our default mode of operation with AI these days is this chat interface where we are talking with an AI that we want to get responses from. And we expect it to have some answers based on the actual data that we're searching. Now, the difference between ChatGPT and Rovo Chat is that Rovo Chat is specifically based off of the data in your instance. It can also reference that information, including information that comes from the connections we talked about in Rovo Search. So Rovo Chat really builds on top of Rovo Search, where it uses those same external connections and all those pieces that it's grabbing from maybe Google Drive or Slack or other tools like that, along with your Atlassian data. It is pulling all of that information together and then allowing you to basically ask questions against that data. So when I'm looking at Rovo Chat, I'm able to say, hey, in this example, in the screenshot, what should I work on next? It's going to go through the entire instance and find some issues to return. But I can go even further than that. And I could even ask it things like, based on the documentation in Google Drive, how should I be proceeding with this project in my Jira project? Or maybe I can ask it, hey, I have this Jira project and I know I have some documentation somewhere else in the organization about it. Can you search through that and tell me if I'm missing anything from the backlog on this Jira project? And it could give answers about that because it has context of your instance along with all those connections that you set up. So this is where having Rovo Chat goes many steps beyond what just having like a Chat GPT that has this just general knowledge can take you, right? Because Rovo Chat knows about your data and it's kind of based off of the information there. It's also going to give us references where we can like link it exactly to the documents that we're getting answers from, which I'll show you when we actually kind of show some demos on it in a second here. So that's Rovo Chat. Rovo Chat is going to be another one where you basically just turn it on and you can start asking it questions. And if you have connections that's set up from Rovo Search as well, they'll show up in here. You'll get links to the data and all the sources that it comes from. All right, so moving on next from chat, the last one, which I said we would take the kind of spend the longest time on, is agents. And agents is going to be kind of a more complex version of using AI in the sense that it takes a bit more setup and to get here. There are some built-in agents, then those are obviously just turn them on and they'll work. But I want to talk through a little bit about what agents can do for us beyond just what chat can do, because agents can actually be interacted with in the same way that you interact with chat. It's kind of another way to use that chat interface, along with some other ways that we can use agents as well. I want to talk through all of those possibilities. So at the base level, what do agents do? And agents are going to basically act as a teammate or as a way to understand complex tasks that we can use AI to understand the context and then take action on that context based on the instructions that we give it when we build that agent out. So a couple of things you can do with it are, these like automated actions. So we're actually gonna be able to use these in automations and create some low touch automations that allow us to basically just behind the scenes have AI acting on our behalf and creating some, complex understanding of those tasks that then can, add a lot of value to reduce some of the load on our maybe support staff or whatever examples. And I'll show some examples of that when we actually pull up the instance and show some demos as well. This is also going to be an area where we have a bunch of different ways we can interact with these agents. So I want to walk through those a little bit. There are basically two ways to create a Rovo agent and then two ways to interact with Rovo agents. And I want to walk through each of those just so that we understand them. And I will show you an example and kind of a demo of each of those when we actually go to the instance as well in the next slide here. So the two ways to create a Rovo agent are, first with the UI. So there is actually just a, UI that you can go to in the Rovo tool and build an agent. You provide it with a prompt and you give it some information and it knows how to operate on that information and it will build the agent for you. That's the first way to create an agent. I'll walk you through that process in a second. The other way we can create an agent is with Forge. So that connection that I showed of Forge being that developer platform on top of Atlassian Cloud, and Rovo happens here with creating a Forge Rovo agent. I'm also going to show you a little bit about what that looks like. I'm going to give you an introduction to it in a second here. But what that allows us to do is basically tie Rovo into our standard software development practices and possibilities, right? So let's say we have a developer team already, as many organizations do. What we can do is have that team develop the actions and tasks and all of the things that we want AI to be able to do on our behalf. And then Rovo fills in the gaps of having the understanding of that context in order to actually create the right action at the right time and facilitate that code being run at the right point. So we're going to show some examples of that as well, just so that you can see, how we can really take the possibilities to, very far heights with Forge and Rovo agents. Those are the two ways to create an agent. The two ways to interact with them are these two screenshots here. So the first way to interact with an agent is through the chat. So you can basically ask questions to a Rovo agent the same way you ask questions to Rovo Chat, and it allows you to get information off of it quickly there. I'll show an example of that here in a second. Same with automations. Automations is second way to interact with a Rovo agent. This is probably what is my favorite feature to date of Rovo, which is using a Rovo agent in an automation, because the automations tool, if you have not used it in Atlassian Cloud yet, or even in Atlassian Data Center as well, is very powerful. And in cloud, we keep getting new features constantly where these automations are becoming more and more rich and powerful. And we can basically do a lot of things that we used to have to write custom code for. We can do that in automations these days. And what using a Rovo agent in automations allows us to do is basically use that engine where we can listen to events happening in our system, say, hey, when an issue is created or transitioned, or I update something, then I can use that context to ask questions to that agent. I can say, hey, give me a response based on this input, and then I can maybe use that to put a comment on the issue or give some context. There are lots of possibilities there that I'm going to walk through some of those as well. But automations plus Rovo is a huge win for kind of automated processes that allow us to get that AI insight and kind of offload some of the Rovo to do that. Right, so I think I've talked a little bit, through each of these pieces and probably talked enough from the theoretical standpoint. Let's just go ahead and jump into taking a bit of a closer look and looking at some demos. Actually seeing this project here, this is a JSM project, and I basically built this to demonstrate to a legal team how we could use Rovo to benefit their processes, how it could maybe offload some of the tasks that are normally being handled by humans, or just make it easier to find information quickly using Rovo. So what I did first is I built an agent that you interact with chat to get access to. So if I go into the chat right here, this chat button shows up whenever you enable Rovo in your instance. You'll notice that it pulls up this legal assistant. If you actually go to this drop down at the top left of this chat area, you'll notice I have a bunch of different chat options I can get. This is just the standard Rovo chat right here, or I can go into the agents that I've created. And this legal assistant is a custom agent that I have built. What this legal assistant is intended to do is help us to get information about this project quickly. So let's say this is a JSM project where many different cases are being handled. So it's not just one case. We have the Smith case, the Jones case, the Hernandez case. There are a bunch of different legal cases happening all in this same project. But if I'm coming into this project needing to know what to work on for just the Smith case, it might actually take me a little bit to kind of find all the things for the Smith case. I'll have to do some searches to find things. especially if that's not categorized correctly. If you had labels, maybe you could find a way to organize it, but then we have to make sure that everything that gets created exactly the same each time, with the labels being always assigned. And human error always takes place there, and we are likely to lose some things along the way trying to organize it that way. So how can we help that process, or at least make it easier to approach? And with legal assistant as my agent here, I can actually just say something like, help me with the Smith case. And I have essentially set up this agent to understand that I'm going to ask it about a particular case. And what it should do is respond with all of the upcoming tasks about that case particularly. So it's actually searching through both the summary and the description and the comments and everything that's part of the ticket. And if that request has the word Smith followed by the word case, so basically if it is about the Smith case, then it's going to return that here. It's also going to go a little bit beyond just kind of like a text search in that context, because we're using Rovo, right? This is AI. It's able to understand the context. So if I had something that was not directly saying this is for the Smith case, and it just said Smith somewhere in the context, it'd be able to still respond that to me, because it knows that what it's looking for is anything related to that family name Smith. So I've been given two tasks here that I can look at. You'll also notice that at the bottom it says prioritization. The contract review task should be taken as the higher priority. The reason that it's saying this is because I've actually told this agent to prioritize any issues that have the word contract in them, or that have any context around a contract being used in that ticket. So essentially, anything that gets created that has the word contract, I'm going to assume as a higher priority. And if I go and ask this agent, which thing should I work on next, it is going to give me that contract review ticket first, because it is that higher priority based on the context I gave the agent. So this is just kind of one example of how I can use agents to help along the process. What I want to do is use this as a way to also talk about what it looks like to edit and view and kind of create this agent itself, right? Because we've now shown the usage of the agent. This is how we interact with an agent through chat. How do we actually go ahead and create an agent that we want to interact with in this way? So if I go ahead and go to this next screen here, this is actually the Rovo product page. If you go to your products switcher here and find Rovo, you'll end up here. This is where we access the search for Rovo Search as well. So if you kind of attach all your connections and data, you go here and you can access search that way. We can also just see all of the agents that exist in my instance, and we can chat with them and kind of test things out here. You'll see the history of my chats are here as well. What I can do from here is just kind of go into this browse agent screen. And what I want to do is find that legal assistant and go ahead and go into the edit screen for that agent. This is what it looks like to build an agent with the UI. So as I was talking about before, there are two ways to build a Rovo agent. One of them, and the first one, kind of the easiest of those, is with the UI. And this is something that you can do basically as long as you know how to write a prompt for AI. You can build an agent and you can create that functionality right out of the box, including actions, as I'll show in a second. So I'm going to set an owner and I can give a description, but really the important part is this prompt right here. And you'll notice that I've kind of have a couple different paragraphs, really different parts of this prompt, telling it to narrow down its results based on things. So essentially, I've even told it here, when you do a JQL search, don't include just the word case, just look for the family name. Like, I've kind of narrowed down how it needs to search through that context in order to find the right answer. And the process I followed here is basically I started out with a prompt, I tested it a bunch, and it would return some incorrect answers. And then I would go to the prompt and tweak it. And over time, I got to a point where it was returning the correct answer, most of the time, if not all of the time. And then I got to a point where, I haven't seen it return an incorrect answer in a while, because I've kind of narrowed down on the prompt that makes sense. So that's kind of always part of the process with AI, is narrowing down the parts of the prompt and adding context to it so it understands how to approach, that part of the equation. This is the same way that you might approach, asking some other AI agent, like maybe ChatGPT, a question, and you want to kind of narrow down the answers a little bit. But we can do it from this agent, so it's reused each time that you ask a question to this agent. If I go down here, I can also see where I can narrow down the knowledge it has access to. I've actually given this agent only access to this legal team 1 project. I could give it access to the entire instance of Jira, just a couple projects. I could also give it access to Confluence if I wanted it to be able to give me context based on the project, but also the relevant Confluence documents, the knowledge base around this project. I could also give it access to Google Drive, which is one of the connections that we have on this instance. So if I wanted to say, hey, I also want you to search Google Drive for the information about this project, I can turn that on right here. Now, the next step that you can take is actions. So actions are how we actually have an agent do things on behalf of a user. So in order to add one in the UI, it's really simple. You just hit add actions and you have access to basically this whole list of things that you can do with your agent. And what you'll do from that perspective is you'll basically have this create issue action. You'll be able to tell it, when to do that. So I've basically given it access to the ability now to create an issue. And what that'll allow it to do is if you ask it to create an issue based on some information, it'll actually go out and create that issue for you, take action on behalf of that user. It'll basically show up as if the user who asked the question created that issue. And it allows you to kind of add in that functionality really quickly. Now, of course, there's going to be some limitations on actions and what you can do with actions through the UI because we don't have access to just software development as a greater, feature set. That's where Forge will come in a second here, and when we talk about building an agent in Forge with like software development principles taken into account, we're going to be able to basically have an action that is just code that we normally write for any other project that can be run, that can do infinite types of possibilities for that project. So that's how to create an agent with the UI. It's very simple. If you actually go back and I'm going to go ahead and continue, discard changes. You can do the same thing if you just go into this drop down and create an agent. What you'll notice is when you first go into the screen, it'll give you this kind of create an agent type of message screen. I usually skip this screen. This is just to help you create an agent with the AI actually helping you to create the AI agent, which is actually a pretty cool feature set. And it's really nice if you're kind of getting started with agents. If you hit this skip to manual step, you can go straight to writing your prompt. Personally, I like to just skip straight to writing the prompt and kind of go from that standpoint, but it's cool that we have both options there as well. So basically now for Rovo Agents showed how we create one with the UI, how we interact with it with the chat interface, and that leaves kind of two more things to talk about with agents, right? It leaves how do we create one with Forge, and how do we interact with one through automations. So because we were just talking about creating this with a UI, I'm going to go to that Forge example next and kind of show you how we've done that. Now I'm going to jump into the code a little bit. If you're not a developer, no worries. I don't intend to go, so in depth that it's going to kind of be beyond the scope of what we're talking about in this webinar. What I want to do primarily is actually show you how simple the setup is. So I'm going to jump into this file here and just kind of walk through how similar it looks from a setup standpoint to the way we did it in the UI and how approachable it can be to build a Rovo agent with Forge, especially if you have even just a technical consultant that is able to kind of start to do some things on that front. So this is actually an example that I got from Atlassian's site. So that you can get this same demo that I'm looking at here from Atlassian's page on Rovo and on Rovo Agents. I wanted to use it just to walk through the general structure that we have here. So we have a Rovo agent that we're building. I'm not going to go through all the details of kind of the structure around it, because what I really want to point out is that at the end of the day, we still have the same structure. We have a description and a name, and we have a prompt. And this prompt is following the same type of principles that I would follow in the UI. You build the same kind of prompt that you want to build. You go in and you can set conversation starters. I didn't show this in the UI, but it's also available in the UI. This is basically when you go to Rovo Chat or go to an agent in Rovo, you're going to be able to see like a couple examples of what you might want to send to that particular agent. So it kind of gives the user some ideas of what to ask the agent. So that's a pretty nice thing to have there. But the cool thing here is when we get into actions, this is where the difference between building it in the UI and building it in Forge really takes place. This is where it matters, right? When we take that action, I want to be able to write the code behind that action, not just take a preset action defined by kind of like the Atlassian tools that we have. So when I create this action, I've given it a name here, get issues. And what I'm able to do is this follows the same structure as building anything else in Forge, where we have this thing called an action that I kind of outline all of the information around it for Forge to know how to handle it. The key piece of this that is really cool, and a really cool setup that we have around this agent is right here. It's inputs. So the way that you set this up in Forge is you actually tell it, here are the things to look out for in the response that we get, or in the prompt that we get from the user. So whenever I go to this agent and I ask it to find some issues based on a particular label, then that label is going to be what shows up in this label input. So without actually having to say specifically ask the user for a label, I can just say, the user is going to give me a prompt. That prompt should contain a label in it, and the name of that label is going to be used as the value for this input. So when I go and use this value later on, I'm going to have access to it the same way that I would with any other software development. But Rovo is able to create this variable and create this value based off of the context it gets from the agent itself. So whenever I send that prompt in, it's looking for these things, which is a really cool kind of easy way to just say, hey, use Rovo, do the work for me, find that context. Now, beyond that, we just give it a function. And that function, which I'm not going to spend much time looking at because it's just a JavaScript function. This is just a regular function that if you have a development team already in place, they can go build that part of the equation. You can kind of start to see how this part, the prompt and kind of all your actions and everything there, this could be done by a technical consultant or even by just a vaguely technical consultant. And then if you have a developer as well that can build out the functionality and the code to actually run the action, then between that, you've created a team that can build some pretty powerful agents. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the instance here and leave the code for a little bit, but that kind of outlines a little bit of how we can use Forge as that second way of creating an agent and how that gets us to those endless possibilities, because that code and that function that could be written could do anything. It could go to any external tool. It could do any external process, really complex tasks, and then we can respond to the user however we'd like to respond. So that kind of leaves us one final area to talk about with Rovo Agents, which is automations, because we've talked about now both of the ways to create them through the UI, through Forge, and one of the ways to use them, which is through chat. So that final way to use the agent is through automations. So I have the example that we had that screenshot on the previous page 4, actually. This is the auto prioritize issues automation. And what I want to actually do is kind of walk through a little bit of how I built the agent that I use here. Now, a couple of things that I want to show first is kind of the general structure. So if you have not used automations in Jira or Confluence before, essentially we have a list of steps here, and each of these steps defines what I want to do. The first one being a trigger. So this is basically saying when an issue is created on this Legal Team 1 project, go ahead and run this automation. And when this automation runs, it's going to start by using a Rovo agent. So this piece is what is newly added by Rovo. And when I use this Rovo agent option here, I actually have a dropdown where I can select which agent I want to use. I have this legal request prioritizer as the one I'm using. I'm going to actually show this agent in a second to show you how I set it up to work well with this automation. But I can select that agent and then give it a prompt. So from this prompt perspective, we can essentially imagine that we are interacting with this agent as if it were through chat, but we are going to give it a value that is set by the automation. So the way the automations work for kind of some of these values is using what are called smart values. Smart values look like this. They have these curly brackets around the actual text. Essentially, all that this means is that when this issue is created, and I go to this next step, this issue.summary and issue.description will be replaced with the actual summary and actual description of the issue that was created by this trigger, or that caused this trigger to be run. So now what I've done is I've sent a prompt. I basically asked a question to my Rovo agent. So that's kind of a great way to interact with it from the automation, but how do I respond to that correctly? And the way that I do that is by kind of assigning whatever other steps I want to and using a new smart value we can see here called agent response. So agent response works the same way as that issue summary and issue description, with the difference being that this is just the response we get back from the agent. So what would normally have come back as a response to our chat and like this chat screen comes back as this smart value agent response. And we can use that to do different things in the automation. What I've actually done here is I've created an agent that has 3 different possibilities of how to respond. This agent itself will respond with either low, medium, or high priority. And basically, depending on if I get low, medium, or high returned back, I'm going to set the priority of the ticket that was created automatically. So the reason why I built this automation is actually just so that in the process of creating tickets, I can automatically assign priority based on those same metrics that I was talking about before. So let's say it has a contract in the title, and I want to say like anything with the contract is high priority. It'll just happen automatically behind the scenes that anything that has context around a contract will be made into a high priority ticket. So that's going to be what this automation will allow us to do, along with setting some medium and low priority. It's an area where there's a lot of human error around setting priorities because it's a subjective task, right? Setting, how important is this task to the person who's creating it is going to be different than the person who might be actually, consuming that ticket later on. So I'm using Rovo to offload that task to an AI, and that AI might have its own inconsistencies over time, but it's at least going to be more consistent in the metrics that it uses to determine how to assign that that priority, right? So for this project, we've kind of decided that we want to make sure that we have a consistent metric for how we're setting priority. So rather than having each person do that, we're going to use the Rovo agent to do that. Now, if I go ahead and show this agent itself, I want to talk through how we approach building an agent to be successfully utilized from an automation, because it is a little bit different in terms of how we want to think about it. So I'm going to go back to this screen here and find that request prioritizer agent. I'm going to view the agent where I can see the prompt in this instructions section. And what you'll notice is I've actually built this in a purposeful way to only respond very specific responses. I've told it to only respond with a single one-word response, and the only words it can respond are high, medium, and low. And I've basically gone through and given it a prompt for each of the things that might tell me that it is either a high, medium, or low priority. So I started with high because that way, anything that should be a high priority gets caught right away, make it a high priority. We respond with the word high. A couple of things that can do that. Then we go to medium, so anything that is around communicating with a client directly should be a medium, and anything internal that's just internal communication should be a low. And we kind of go through that process. Very intentionally created a separate agent from the agent I was using as that legal assistant earlier, because I need for this agent to only respond with these one-word responses, so that in my automation, when I go to it later on, I am able to use this equals low condition, right? I need to make sure that the response I get is either low, medium, and high. So, basically I created this agent, and there were a couple times that I saw some responses that were not just low, medium, or high. And over time, I tweaked and added context and added more to the prompt to narrow it down so it would just only ever return low, medium, or high. So it's another area where you just over time you start to hone in on what the right prompt is to get the agent to behave the way that you expect that agent to behave. Let's go ahead and just show this one in action so I can kind of show you what it looks like running. If I go ahead and create a ticket, I'm going to do a question for legal, let's say, and I'm just going to say, need a signed contract for the Hernandez case. I can spell that correctly. In the description, I'm just going to say, need a contract. Just kind of typing this out quickly here, but go through and signing is fine. Priority is set to medium here. I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to let the automation assign the priority for me, but I'm going to leave it as medium so we can see right here it is currently set to medium. I go ahead and create this issue. Go ahead and wait for that to be created. And I'm going to go ahead and go view the issue. Now, it might take a second for the automation to run. We'll kind of see how long that goes. And actually, it was pretty quick there. So it's already set to a high priority. That's because I created that issue. It ran the automation, and that automation went and set this priority to high. So I basically now created a process that anytime I, start asking legal about contracts, it's going to set it to a high priority and get a quicker answer than if I were just asking for some internal communication. All right, so that kind of fills out our, 4 areas to talk about for agents, right? We talked about the 2 ways to create it through the UI, through Forge, and the 2 ways to view it and use it through the chat and through automations, and a little bit around the strategies of how to build agents for those particular areas as well. So what I want to do then from here is kind of go back into our presentation and talk a little bit about this complete picture again. Because now we've kind of gone through the features, right? We've seen some demos. We understand search and chat and agents and how they tie together a little bit. And now in our complete picture of this diagram, we can see how Rovo Search and Rovo Chat allow us to connect all this external tooling and the external data into our system so that we can search across the entire enterprise. We can get insights off of that data. And we can use agents to take action on both the internal parts of the process. So like the automation example, I am doing something inside of the instance. I'm just updating that value for my priority. I'm using agents to do that. Or I can go to a Forge agent where I can actually cause side effects in external tools. I can cause data to be sent elsewhere. I can use data from external systems with just whatever code I want to write for that Forge agent. It allows me to really create an infinite possibilities of that process for Forge agents being implemented. We kind of see how this picture gets built and how Rovo is the connector for a lot of these processes along with Forge. All right, so now that we've kind of gone from this picture to talking about some use cases and then talking about the structure again, one of the things I do want to mention here, because it's a question that does come up a lot, is just around security and around this data, right? We're talking about AI and talking about data being used to potentially train models and kind of what does that look like. And that's one thing I wanted to point out here because it is a question that will come up. The way that Atlassian Intelligence and Rovo work behind the scenes is that there are some internal models inside of Atlassian products. Basically, when you send the prompts and you kind of ask things to chat and search and all these different areas, what it's going to do is use a combination of those internal models from Atlassian, and they also have some contracts with OpenAI that it will send some of that to also get some information from both places and using both AIs. Now, the important thing to note about the fact that it goes out to OpenAI is the fact that the way that the communication is set up between Atlassian and OpenAI is that all of the inputs that you send into it, so like the actual data that you send through Rovo, is sent to OpenAI as like individual inputs. They aren't going to be kind of putting everything in context and giving all the contextual information to OpenAI, where it can train OpenAI models. And nothing that you're sending into Rovo is being used to train other models elsewhere. It is only being used to train your model. And that's something that's going to be kind of important to keep in mind, that when we look at implementing AI across the organization, there's a benefit to using Atlassian Intelligence and Rovo and the Atlassian solution to this, because they've actually spent a lot of time around that security. They have the correct contracts with OpenAI to make sure things aren't being trained for other models based on your data. That's being handled by Atlassian and through Atlassian servers. And that allows us to kind of have the same trust in that security as we do with the rest of the Atlassian cloud platform. Now, going from there, I just want to talk a little bit about some strategies around Rovo agent implementation. And I've talked a little bit about that from the perspective of our demos. But what I do want to outline are kind of my 3 steps to implementing a Rovo agent and what that looks like, because I think this is important to understand just from a standpoint of how to approach this process in your organization. And step 1 is just understand the problem and establish a measure of success. So 2 sides of that, right? The first one is that we really don't want to be a hammer in search of a nail. And what I mean by that is basically we don't want to be using the solution of Rovo to find a problem, right? We want to find the problem first. We want to start from a problem area, an area of high friction, an area of low automation where we have a lot of human interaction for low complexity tasks. We want to find the problem that we're trying to solve first. We want to determine if Rovo is the right solution for that problem. We want to make sure we aren't attached to Rovo being the solution to every problem, because then we end up in a scenario where we're using the wrong technology for the wrong problems. Then that establish a measure of success is really important here. In order to determine if Rovo is the right solution, we're going to need to do some experimentation. And when we go into that second phase for experimentation, we need to know what it actually looks like to be successful with Rovo. What does a successful implementation look like for us, and how does that play out, right? So in step 1, we establish these are the things I care about in order to prove that I'm getting the ROI out of Rovo that I'm looking for. Things like maybe less time spent on tickets in JSM. Maybe you want a less requests coming in to the HR team about simple questions, right? Like we can use chat and use Confluence documents in with the context of chat to get that information without having to go to the HR team for kind of simple questions. We can have the metric be, time spent on tickets, but also time spent before the first interaction. So maybe it is, I want to go through and see on my JSM tickets, am I getting to an answer quicker? Am I responding to people more quickly? Is the amount of tickets that are being handled that are low complexity going down because Rovo is handling the actions for those? Those are the types of things I'm going to be talking about before I even start experimenting, so I know what I'm going after when I'm actually implementing Rovo. Step two is going to be to experiment and explore how Rovo agents can kind of help address those problems, right? This is the actual experimentation phase. Usually you're going to have kind of like a corporate sponsor for Rovo at this point. You're going to have maybe a team or just a developer or a technical consultant or whoever it might be that's going to be experimenting with Rovo, determining basically, can Rovo solve this problem? Can I accomplish that measure of success with different ways of doing things? This is where we don't want to be too serious about what things we try, right? We want to try everything, see what works, what doesn't work, and go from there, kind of narrow down the right solution for that problem. Step three is to connect with end users and kind of go back against that original measure of success. This is where we go from the experimentation phase to actually narrowing it down to this are the couple of agents or the couple of things that in Rovo that solve the problem that I'm looking to solve. This is where I want to kind of add that value and accomplish that measure of success. We want to actually put it in front of users, have users interact with it, and determine if we have met that measure of success that we set in step one. This is where that three-step process gets us to a point where we can say, did Rovo solve this problem? Yes or no, and kind of make a determination of if Rovo is the right solution going forward for that particular problem. All right, so going from there, where does Valiantys come into the equation? And I want to talk through that a little bit because we are spending a lot of effort kind of pushing into Rovo and how we can help our customers implement Rovo across the organization, how we can accomplish that diagram that I was showing earlier of that complete picture of using Rovo and Atlassian Cloud and all these other tools. What does that actually look like, to implement that into an organization? And that's where Valiantys comes into the equation. We can kind of use the Atlassian tools to tailor that AI to our context and solving some of these bottlenecks. And then we can go to building really fully custom solutions powered by Rovo. And I'm not talking about just building a Forge agent or just building a couple agents. I'm talking about looking at the organization as a whole, understanding where those points of friction or bottlenecks live, and using Rovo and Atlassian Intelligence and the Atlassian Cloud Platform to kind of solve those points of friction as a unified approach to kind of building that solution across the whole instance, across the whole organization, and across all of the teams that are using it. So we can kind of help you along that process of understanding how Rovo and AI benefit the whole organization, the whole business, the whole instance of your Atlassian Cloud Platform, and implementing the agents, the search and chat, kind of all these different pieces, the Forge components of that to accomplish the goal that you're looking for. The last thing here is just next steps. So we've kind of gone through our content for the most part. We've got a couple of things that you can do to follow up and to continue kind of going towards Rovo and what that implementation looks like. So the first thing here is that my QR code for my LinkedIn is there. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to do that and kind of stay in touch that way. You can use that QR code to get there. My email is also down below right there. And there should be some chats being sent as well for some of the offerings that we have, like our YouTube channel and training and upcoming webinars, that kind of thing. Next thing is to reach out to us about our Rovo Jumpstart offering. So this is an offering that we have kicked off to basically help customers go through the process of that three-step approach that I was talking about, right? We're going to come in and determine what are the use cases, what are the reasons why Rovo can solve this problem, and do the experimentation to actually get through that process. We're going to spend most of our time in this Rovo Jumpstart on steps 1 and 2, right? We're going to be looking at how can we determine the problems we need to solve with AI and with Rovo, and then start to do some of that experimentation and kind of go further along the lines, give you some education around Rovo, some further offerings there. And then the next thing that I want to talk about is we have an upcoming Rovo workshop that's going to be in the new year in January. And I'll be kind of leading that workshop. It'll be a couple hours, so a little bit longer format than this and a lot more hands-on. So the intent behind that workshop, and there should be a chat being sent right now as well with the link to that workshop, is to just spend some more time getting deeper into the Rovo tool set, figuring out how can we approach the Rovo tooling in that 1, 2, 3 step approach, but also just get some practical hands-on time using the product, seeing how it affects things, like trying things out, doing some trial and error along with myself and our team. So I'd be happy to have you join that as well. If you're not quite ready to kind of jump into a Rovo Jumpstart offering where you put a week or two of time into using Rovo, that workshop is a great way to continue and kind of a good next step into the process for implementing Rovo across your organization. Okay, so that basically takes us to the end of the webinar. We have some time here. I can answer some questions. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen in Zoom there. I see one question there that I'm going to kind of address here in a second. But if you have questions as I'm kind of talking through other questions, feel free to add them there and I can answer them. And otherwise, I hope you got something out of this topic and the things I've walked through here. And any questions you have, you can always reach out to my email that is there on the screen or over LinkedIn or however you'd like to contact me, and we can talk about any questions you might have. Go ahead and check our Q&A here. Yeah, so the question was probably earlier on and asking about a contextual chat. So the contextual chat that we have is obviously like that Rovo Chat offering, and it's the way that we can get chat against the context of our instance. Try to give it just a little bit of time here to ask any questions that you might have. All right, so I have a question for, is Rovo priced for all the users on your site, or can you pick how many users can use Rovo? So as of right now, Rovo is for all the users on your site. So the cost of the Rovo license, which is also another important thing to point out potentially, is Rovo is a separate product. So unlike Atlassian Intelligence, where you kind of get it included with an enterprise license, Rovo is going to be a separate product with its own licensing. And that licensing is based off of all of the users on your instance. There's not currently a way to kind of pick and choose which users get access to Rovo, because you're turning it on for the instance as a whole. And the pricing for Rovo and it being a separate product has a lot to do with the fact that the processing that happens behind the scenes for tools like Rovo is very heavy. And the processing is dependent on how much data is in your instance. So how many users you have in your instance in total is kind of a good metric for how much of the processing power Atlassian needs to put towards the product. So that's why it's priced that way. But that is kind of how we currently have that pricing set up. Okay, so are available connectors for users out of the box only, or is it the option to make your own third-party connector? That is a great question. So talking about Rovo Search and Rovo Chat and kind of these connectors and these external tools, as of right now, there is not a way to create your own connector. I have heard from Atlassian a couple times some things that sound like that might be in the works. I have no for sure knowledge on whether or not we will get a make your own third-party connector type of tooling in the future. I would love to see that, because I think that being able to build our own connectors for Rovo would be an awesome feature set. But I imagine it's a quite challenging thing to build, and so we'll kind of have to see over time if that comes to fruition. The way that we approach that today, if there is not a connector for the tool that we want to implement with, is that we'll then jump into a Forge agent. So using the agents with Forge and using that to connect to the external tool can get actually a lot of the benefits that you might get out of having the connection, and you can build it yourself. So I would say that not having a connector to that tool that you want to integrate with is not really a blocker to getting some of the value that we want out of that connection. It just means it takes a little bit more work to get there. And so if you have some ideas around connections that you'd like to see and kind of how can we use Forge and Rovo to accomplish that, reach out and we can talk about some of the ways that we can make that happen, despite the fact that there might not be a connector for every tool out there. All right, so I do not see any other questions in the chat, so we can go ahead and end our webinar here. Thank you for attending, and I hope you got something out of this, and we hope to see you back for either that Jumpstart offering or the workshop coming out in the new year, and hope that you have some success with Rovo in the future. So thank you for joining, and hope to see you back soon.